our daily videos. Now with all that being said, let's get right into the video. Number 1. The crazy ex-boyfriend from hell. This is a crazy story indeed, especially when you think of a crazy ex. This person claims to have an ex who was very abusive in their relationship and happened to attack her seemingly for no reason after their breakup. This may sound bad, but the ex had previously broken into different addresses where she had lived in multiple times. It seemed like he knew exactly her location 24/7. No matter where off she went to run and try to hide from him, he seemingly knew where she was 24/7. This had to include college dorms, which is surprising since no one seemed to notice a random kid breaking into a room of a girl in such a public area such as a college. Soon after, with 2 other friends, they tried renting an apartment where she thought she would be safer from this ex-boyfriend since she now didn't feel safe enough to be in one of the college dorms. She thought she would be better off in one of the apartment, but again she was wrong. He again found out her location and followed to break into the building itself, and while she was showering, he seemingly broke in with no problems at all. After breaking into the apartment, he followed by locking her into a bedroom, and he wasn't going to leave anytime soon, or that's what he thought at least, since she threatened to call the cops. And right before the cops had arrived into the apartment building, he managed to leave just in time, so the cops weren't really able to arrest him. Eventually, the writer of this story ended up going on another date with a different guy. She did followed by warning him about her ex, who was a little deranged and a bit psychotic. He thought the date would go fine, and told her not to worry so much. Of course, there was no real surprise when her ex came and crashed the date with 5 of his friends. They ended up jumping her date and smashing her in the face, and right as they left, all they had to say that she was a cheater. Eventually, she moved back home to feel safe from this psycho. Then he had the nerve to try to break into their home on a Sunday morning at around 5 o'clock, but her ex-military dad happened to just be awake and ended up threatening him and putting a gun to his mouth and warning him to stay away and scaring him away as a whole. Even years after this event, they parted ways and never saw each other again, but anytime he saw her, he would look away in fear and total terror. Number 2. The subway stalker. This is pretty creepy and very bad in most cases. The story starts off with a man going to Subway to buy his food daily. This seems fine for a while, not really questioning why he's actually at the Subway in the first place. Turns out the reason he would be at the Subway is literally just to look at the cashier. This was even more obvious as when he would go, he would sit there at the Subway for at least 2 hours a day, just staring at the cashier, even as she rung up different people. Anytime he would buy his Subway too, he would always try to start some form of conversation besides buying his food, which isn't considerably a bad thing. But the case was that he was trying to put himself in front of her. He also was trying to get her to go on a date with him, even trying to offer her his phone number at times, though she always tried to respond with no, though he had already been rejected multiple times. One day while the manager went to the bank on a slow day, the cashier was in the back room alone with the door locked, but she managed to hear the doorbells ringing. When she went outside to check, there was no one there. Soon after, he decided to call the Subway. He was asking very explicit questions to her. They became very uncomfortable, so she ended up hanging up soon after. But of course, this didn't really stop him. He ended up calling another time and continued to ask the same explicit questions that she was afraid to answer in the first place. Eventually, the cashier decided to call the manager and tell her to hurry back to the Subway. And around rush hour, he decided to call the place one more time. This time, the cashier didn't answer. The manager decided to pick up the phone. The cashier really doesn't know what the manager had to say to the man. All she knew was that the manager had threatened to call the cops on him if he ever decided to come back to the Subway. Final encounter that the cashier had with the man was one day when they were closing up shop, and she ended up noticing him trying to crawl into her car since she accidentally left the back door open. She told her manager about this, and the manager, once she had closed up the store, had proceeded to call the cops. Turns out that the cashier had a good eye, since the man had tried to murder her in her own vehicle as she drove away from the Subway. It was a pretty lucky call, in all honesty. Number 3. The ex who stabs the ex's fiance. This crazy ex story starts with the writer who dated a guy for only 2 months, which at first doesn't sound too bad until you figure out about his ex. He has a crazy ex-girlfriend who stalks the writer for almost up to 5 years non-stop. At this point, she should have just called the police on the girl who was already harassing her for 5 years for the sole reason that she dated that person's ex, which at that point already sounds crazy enough as it is, but she only targeted that one person. She never apparently went after anyone else who dated that guy. All the harassment came from Facebook messages and text messages that she had gotten from this one girl alone. The kicker is that she only got left alone after the ex found out that her ex was already getting married to someone else. This really must have struck a nerve, as the ex was already known for being psycho as it is. Really, after already harassing someone for up to 5 years, it should have been no surprise that she was extremely mad that her ex already had a fiance, and her ex ended up moving all the way to Texas with his new fiance, where I'm going to assume they were going to get married and have their life in. This doesn't get crazier than this until you find out that the ex also moved out to Texas Texas, for obvious reasons. She tried to follow him all the way in Texas of all places, and ended up luring his fiancée into a Denny's parking lot, where she then stabbed her in the face with a fork, which already sounds pretty bad and harsh. What happened to the crazy ex-girlfriend after this point is pretty much unknown. Hearing how she pretty much assaulted her ex's fiancé, I'm pretty sure she's behind bars at this point. Next up at number 4, we have the creepy math tutor. This is really something you don't see every day, especially when you think of a person whose literal job is just to help you and do your schoolwork, especially a person working a part-time job to get some extra spending money, and you'd think they just want to get their job done and go home. Well, this case is a bit unique. The tutor at the time was about 65 years old, and one of his clients ended up noticing that he was pretty much very lonely all the time. He didn't have any kids and was pretty much single to the fact that he didn't even get married. The student at the time was only a junior in high school when she started going to tutoring at this place, and they would frequently chat while he was showing her some math problems, since that was the reason she was there in the first place. This would eventually last only for 2 years until she graduated from high school and stopped attending tutoring lessons at this place. Well, her friend's little brother began attending tutoring a while after when he had entered high school. At first, he was struggling in math as well, and ended up getting the same tutor, who one day drove him home while she was visiting her friend. Eventually, when her friend's little brother got dropped off, she politely gave him a hello, which, due to the fact that he was pretty much lonely most of the time, he ended up mistaking the polite hello for a romantic gesture, which of course she didn't know at the time. Soon after this, he ended up sending her a letter expressing his feelings for her, which her parents promptly ended up returning to the tutoring center they had worked at. This resulted in him shortly being fired for accessing personal information without just cause. That wasn't all that happened though. Soon after, he ended up sending a bouquet of flowers to her house, with a text message shortly after expressing that he still wanted to go on a date with her. At this point, he just ended up freaking her out, since at first it started with a letter and now she's getting sent flowers by this tutor. She ended up calling the cops, who gave him a warning if he ever done something like that again that he was going to get arrested, and after the incident, he had never contacted her ever again. Number 5, the internet stalker. When you start meeting people over the internet, you are always given a warning to be careful and not to give out personal information to said person. But of course, not many people actually follow these warnings when you meet someone online for the first time, especially after you start liking talking to them, as you build some sort of trust and start telling them more personal things about you. Of course, not many red flags are brought up at first, but eventually these kind of people can actually become very obsessive over someone and will force you to tell them every little thing that you do in your day. It all goes into the finest details of your day and your life as a whole. In this story, the girl and her pen pal had built a pretty big relationship as far as to go and do explicit things with each other. Eventually, she didn't actually enjoy doing these kind of things and did things like this out of pity, but she was also afraid of what he would do if she ended up cutting ties with him. Eventually, she found her So, who she promptly fell in love with. This became a pretty big positive impact for her, and she ended up finding someone she could actually be with. But of course, her pen pal ended up trying to get in the way, wanting information about him, and wanted to know every little detail that she knew. Of course, this wasn't his relationship, but was going to try to force every little detail about their relationship until he knew the extent of their relationship at this point. This resulted in her So talking to the pen pal stalker and confronted him about what he was doing to her, but the pen pal ended up just asking him more questions about the relationship. So the So ended up shutting down the pen pal, especially when he started asking explicit questions, so the So really wasn't going to take any of it. This ended up turning the stalker away. She never ended up hearing about him again, allowing them to enjoy their lives without having that stalker ask or bother them ever again for personal information that he didn't even need to have to know. Thanks for watching today's video on 5 ridiculously creepy stalker stories. If you guys did like the video, make sure to leave a like below and also comment which was your favorite choice from the list. Also subscribe and hit the notification bell so you can be notified when we release our daily videos. And from all of us here at the channel, have a great day.